You know what really gets under my skin? Watching seniors get treated like second-class citizens at airports simply because they're trying to do the right thing. They show up early. They have their documents ready. They follow every sign. And yet somehow they end up exhausted, confused, and sometimes even missing their flights while younger, savvier travelers breeze right through. So let me ask you this. What's the single worst airport experience you've had since you turned 60? And what do you wish someone had told you before you walked through those doors? I really want you to think about that and drop your experience in the comments, because I'm about to share 15 secrets that directly address the hidden pitfalls that catch seniors off guard, and I guarantee at least 3 of them will make you say, "Why didn't anyone tell me this sooner?" Let me start with something that might surprise you. The TSA has a little-known policy that explicitly allows passengers 75 and older to keep their shoes on during screening. I say little-known because I can't tell you how many travelers in that age bracket I've watched struggling to untie laces, balancing on one foot, trying to hold on to a moving conveyor belt, and not a single TSA officer stops them to say, "Ma'am, you don't have to do that." They won't stop you because the policy is written as an accommodation, not a mandatory exemption. If you simply keep your shoes on and walk through, they might flag you for additional screening because the assumption is that everyone removes shoes unless they explicitly state they need the accommodation. So you have to speak up. Walk up to the officer at the start of the lane and say clearly, "I'm over 75 and I'd like to use the senior accommodation to keep my shoes on." 9 times out of 10, they'll nod and wave you through. But if you don't say it, they'll assume you forgot the rules. That brings me to something deeper. When you're in your 20s or 30s, airport security feels like a minor inconvenience. You bounce through, annoyed but compliant. But as we get older, the physical toll multiplies. Every extra step, every time you bend down, every moment standing in a cramped queue drains energy you need for the journey ahead. The system was not designed with aging bodies in mind. It was designed for efficiency, for moving as many people as possible as quickly as possible. Nobody is going to see you struggling with your carry-on and automatically offer a wheelchair. Nobody is going to notice you've been standing for 45 minutes and your legs are starting to ache. You have to become comfortable asking for help before you think you need it, not after. Let's talk about wheelchair assistance because this is one of the most misunderstood services in the entire airport ecosystem. Seniors often assume that wheelchair assistance is only for people with obvious mobility impairments, people using walkers or canes, people who simply cannot walk at all. But that's not how it works. Airlines contract with third-party service companies, and those companies provide wheelchair attendants to anyone who requests the service in advance, regardless of whether you have a visible disability. The key phrase here is in advance. You can request wheelchair assistance when you book your flight, or you can call the airline up to 48 hours before departure to add it to your reservation. If you wait until you get to the airport to ask for it, you will be placed on a list, and you might wait 45 minutes or more for an attendant to become available, especially at busy airports like Atlanta, Chicago O'Hare, or Los Angeles. Now, I've heard people say, "But I don't want to take resources away from someone who really needs it." Let me stop you right there. That's a noble thought, but it's also misguided. The airlines staff these services based on demand. If seniors don't request the assistance, they actually reduce staffing levels because they assume the demand isn't there. By requesting the service, even if you think you could technically walk the distance, you're helping ensure that adequate resources are available for everyone. Let's talk about tipping etiquette for wheelchair attendants because this is a gray area and nobody explains clearly. The official policy for most airlines is that tipping is not required, but the reality is these attendants often make minimum wage or slightly above, and they rely on tips to supplement their income. The going rate is $5 for a standard escort from check-in to the gate, and $10 if they help with luggage or wait with you. If you have multiple bags or a particularly long distance, $15 to $20 is appropriate. The attendants talk to each other, and they remember passengers who don't tip. I'm not saying that to guilt you. I'm saying it because understanding the unspoken rules helps you navigate the system smoothly. Now, let's talk about medication, because this is genuinely one of the most dangerous areas where seniors make assumptions that can ruin a trip. The TSA allows you to bring medications in pill form, liquid form, injectable form, pretty much any form, in reasonable quantities, and they are not subject to the 3-ounce liquid rule. But here's the nuance. The key phrase is reasonable quantities. If you show up with a 12-month supply of blood pressure medication, they're going to ask questions. If you have liquid medications that aren't in their original pharmacy bottles, they can test them or even confiscate them if they can't verify what they are. I always tell people to keep medications in their original containers with the pharmacy labels intact. I know it's bulky, but that label is your proof. Without it, you're relying on the discretion of a TSA officer. And never, ever put all your medication in checked luggage. I've seen this happen more times than I can count. A senior checks their bag at the curb. It contains their heart medication, their diabetes supplies, their thyroid medication, everything. Then the flight gets delayed, or they miss a connection, or the airline loses the bag, and suddenly they're in a city where they don't have a pharmacy. They don't have their insurance information, and they're trying to get emergency refills while also managing the stress of travel. Your medication should be in your carry-on, and if possible, you should have a small backup supply in your personal item as well. I also recommend carrying a printed list of your medications with dosages and prescribing doctors, separate from your phone, because phones die and paper doesn't need Wi-Fi. I want to tell you about a program called TSA Cares. If you haven't heard of it, you're not alone because they do a terrible job advertising it. TSA Cares is a helpline that you can call 72 hours before your flight to request assistance for passengers with disabilities, medical conditions, or mobility issues. They can arrange for a passenger support specialist to meet you at the checkpoint, walk you through security, explain exactly what's going to happen, and advocate for you if any issues arise. This is particularly valuable for seniors who have medical devices like pacemakers, insulin pumps, ostomy bags, or joint replacements that might set off the metal detector. Instead of having to explain your medical history to a TSA officer in front of a crowd of strangers, the passenger support specialist handles that for you privately and professionally. The number is 855-787-2227. Put it in your phone right now. Here's another secret that changes everything about how you move through the airport. You can use any security checkpoint that serves your terminal, regardless of what your boarding pass says. If you're flying out of Terminal A at Denver, you can use the Terminal A checkpoint, the Terminal B checkpoint, or even the Terminal C checkpoint if it's closer to where you parked. The only exception is if you're flying international and need to access customs. I've seen seniors walking past a completely empty checkpoint because they thought they had to use the one listed on their boarding pass, when in reality, they could have been through security and sitting at their gate in the time it took them to walk to the correct line. If you're 65 or older, TSA PreCheck is not a luxury, it's a necessity. The cost is $78 for 5 years, and if you factor in the time, the bending, the shoe removal, the laptop removal, the liquid bag removal, it pays for itself in reduced stress alone. But here's the nuance that a lot of people miss. Even if you have PreCheck, it doesn't always show up on your boarding pass. The airline system has to send your known traveler number to TSA, and if there's a typo, if your name doesn't match exactly, or if you booked through a third-party site that didn't pass along the information, you won't get the PreCheck indicator. Check your boarding pass immediately after check-in, before you leave home. If the PreCheck indicator isn't there, call the airline right away. Once you're at the checkpoint, there's nothing they can do. Now, I want to address something that makes people uncomfortable, but it's too important to ignore. As we age, our bodies change in ways that affect how we interact with security screening. Things like bladder control issues, the need for frequent bathroom breaks, or the difficulty of standing for extended periods. These are medical realities, not character flaws. You have the right to request a private screening at any time. You don't have to give a reason. You simply say, "I request a private screening," and they will take you to a private room where you can be screened without the pressure of an audience. This is particularly important for seniors who use incontinence products, colostomy bags, or catheters because the standard pat-down procedure can be invasive and embarrassing. In a private screening, you have more control over the process, and the officers are typically more patient. Let's talk about the boarding process because this is where airlines have created a confusing hierarchy. Most airlines offer pre-boarding for passengers with disabilities or who need extra assistance, but they don't always announce it clearly. Sometimes they'll say pre-boarding and then immediately call for first class, and seniors who qualify sit there wondering if they should stand up. If you need extra time to board, if you need assistance getting to your seat, or if you need to stow medical equipment, You can pre-board regardless of what the announcement says. Walk up to the gate agent before they call any other groups and say, "I need pre-boarding due to a medical condition." They cannot ask what the condition is. They cannot require proof. The Americans with Disabilities Act protects you here. Now, connecting flights. If you're over 70 and you have a connection that's less than 90 minutes, you're playing a dangerous game. I don't care if the airline sold you that itinerary. The reality is that if your first flight is delayed by 30 minutes, which happens about 20% of the time, you now have an hour or less to deplane, navigate to the next gate, and get to your seat before the doors close. For a senior with mobility issues, that's not enough time. Book connections of at least 2 hours, and if you have the flexibility, book a direct flight even if it costs more. The cost of missing a connection, spending a night in an airport hotel, dealing with rebooking stress, that's never reflected in the initial ticket price. Hydration and nutrition seem like basic things, but airports make them deceptively difficult. You cannot bring a full water bottle through security, but you can bring an empty water bottle through and fill it at a water fountain or bottle filling station on the other side. The reason this matters is that dehydration is a serious risk during air travel. The cabin air on an airplane has about 10 to 20% humidity, which is drier than most deserts. Combined with the diuretic effect of coffee, tea, and alcohol, it's very easy to become dehydrated without even realizing it. Dehydration can cause dizziness, confusion, muscle cramps, and for seniors taking certain medications, dangerous drops in blood pressure. Bring an empty bottle and aim to drink at least 8 ounces of water for every hour of flight time. Let me talk about the human element. TSA officers have a tremendous amount of discretion. They can decide to send you to secondary screening for any reason or no reason at all. They can make your life easy or they can make it difficult, and a lot of that comes down to your demeanor. Seniors who approach the checkpoint with a calm, clear, confident manner, who have their ID and boarding pass ready, who listen to instructions and follow them without argument, move through much faster than those who seem confused or argumentative. I'm not saying you have to perform compliance to be treated decently, but understanding that these officers are dealing with thousands of stressed-out people every day can help you navigate the interaction more smoothly. Hearing loss affects so many seniors, and the airport environment is designed to be hostile to anyone with hearing impairment. Announcements are made over crackly loudspeakers with heavy reverb. Gate agents sometimes whisper when they're making boarding announcements. When you check in, tell the agent that you have hearing loss and ask them to note it in your reservation. This can trigger gate agents to make visual announcements or to personally come find you for important updates. Also, many airlines offer text message alerts for boarding and gate changes, which is a game changer for anyone who can't rely on audio announcements. Now, the single biggest mistake I see seniors make at airports is showing up too early. I know that sounds counterintuitive because everything tells you to arrive early, but there's a balance. If you arrive 3 hours before a domestic flight, you're adding 2 hours of standing, walking, and waiting to an already tiring day. You're wearing yourself out before you even get on the plane. The sweet spot for seniors is 90 minutes for domestic flights and 2 hours for international. This gives you enough time to check bags, get through security, and make it to your gate without the exhaustion of a 3-hour marathon. But here's the nuance. This only works if you've done the preparation I've talked about. If you have pre-check, if you've pre-booked wheelchair assistance, if you know which checkpoint to use, 90 minutes is plenty. Prepare so you don't have to suffer. Your choice of footwear. I cannot tell you how many seniors I've seen wearing lace-up shoes that take 3 minutes to put on and off, or sandals that offer no support, or dress shoes that become painful after 20 minutes of walking. The ideal airport shoe for a senior is a slip-on walking shoe with good arch support and a non-slip sole. You want something that you can take off and put on quickly if you go through standard screening, but that also provides stability on slick airport floors. I also recommend wearing compression socks on flights longer than 2 hours. They help prevent deep vein thrombosis, which becomes a greater risk as we age, and they reduce the swelling that makes your shoes feel tight halfway through the flight. Carry-on luggage. I see seniors lugging oversized bags that they can barely lift. The ideal carry-on is a 2-wheeled spinner bag that rolls smoothly and is light enough to lift into the overhead bin if necessary. 4-wheeled spinners are popular, but they're less stable on carpet and uneven surfaces, and they have a tendency to roll away. If you can't lift your bag into the bin, don't try. Ask for help. Flight attendants are usually happy to assist. But the best strategy is to pack light enough that you don't need to lift anything heavy. If you've had recent surgery, hospitalization, or any significant medical event, most airlines require a medical clearance form signed by your doctor. If you don't have it at check-in, they can deny you boarding. I've seen this happen to seniors who thought they were fine to travel, didn't mention anything, and then got flagged because they were using oxygen or had visible medical equipment. Call the airline before you go to the airport. Ask them what documentation they need. Get it signed. Bring copies. Finally, your home airport. The one you fly out of most often has its own quirks and idiosyncrasies. If you fly out of the same airport multiple times a year, take the time to learn its layout. Know which checkpoint is least crowded at your usual travel times. Know where the quiet restrooms are, the ones away from the main food courts. Know which gates have the most seating. This knowledge becomes a form of capital that you can spend to make your travel easier. I've spent years watching, researching, and experiencing airport travel from every angle. The system isn't inherently hostile to seniors, but it also doesn't care about you. It's a machine designed for efficiency. If you don't know how to work the machine will work you. But when you know these secrets, when you understand your rights and how to advocate for yourself, you stop being a passenger who gets pushed around and you become someone who moves through the airport with confidence and dignity. So go back to that first question I asked. What's your worst airport experience? And what do you wish someone had told you? Drop it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear before their next trip.